today into Dakatson Corse. Tendi Juni Corte, Take Swan, she's on Tendi Juni de Lunjundo, Lundo, said in the Here Swan. Lunjun de Koa Chatong Cori, Jenny Here Swan. Lundo de Koane Tarne, Tabatotong Corte, Hele Tendation, Chin Swan. Conje Dakarsego, Maripa Yena, Le Yere, any Shewa Yere, Gawa Yere Stende. Any maripa mena le ye mare, any shewa ye mare, gawa ye mare, statnenda wugone, tendi corte, lunju don lodo corte, so takazon, kieta sonwa. Tateri, sike jadu juni pateke, tendi seate, tendi corte, and number soje bigi, che, za chesho, ka chesho, imbi corte, so ke shigindu yon. Tende imba yindu, tenjindewa, juwa, de Jawa yi, sungin zeji kiba samote, kongin din na yondon tongwante. Soje teni riba nancho tangose la shebara ta tombo de lana.
So, in our last session, we had mentioned the 12 links of dependent origination in both the forward progression and in the backward succession. And when they go forward, from ignorance and onwards, this is basically the process by which we are born again and again within samsara. This is sort of the way that samsara originates. And then the backwards progression, on the other hand, is the progress by which cyclic existence is reversed. So it describes nirvana, the dependent origination of nirvana. If there is ignorance, then on account of that, there will also be karma. Because of that, there will be birth, and then there will be suffering, in very briefly, right? Then without ignorance, there's also no karma, no birth, and then no suffering, right? So this speaks of the processes of samsara and nirvana, respectively. And now we come to verse 112, which describes how dependent origination is the most important teaching within Buddhism. And the verse reads, "Within the treasury of Buddha's words, there's none so precious, so profound as this. And those who see the things dependently arise do see the Buddha, perfect knower of the truth."
Shazan ta deki kare lagindu lana, tenjin dewan juwan desedu, ta katsu kondo tendik kor mombo herwa, ta tendik junik korte, ta tendik junik korte, ta karse kurugo, tomborte sumbola tene, ane yon, ni le yewa, debula. Yon debu nibo de jushene, yon debula dum le yewa imba. Yon dum de jushene debula son le yewa, so ta trege gone koag kordon korji shedon luduki, pesha yendo teso li he yesarwa. Shezon ta tende imba yindu konje, kason kondu he gobe, tenjin rewan ju kor kon imba te, ane soje chondende, jawa zobe soje chondende ki, chiji pumbo jede gedon la soba su mombo hibo ji su gobi nongi non la kipa se du ta za chesho ka chesho de yinba tende heba res. Tene samo se du ta kokale kabo yeres. Lojong maje na kogi mares. Ane lojong she tende she na pena tenje zawa heran dabo, oman juban dabo. Ani oma ritso nganda wotende le lojong she shewa ina ani di tendo de hakogi res. Tene tenjin dewan juwa samu za chibu yinba di tendo de hakona pendo kare yare lawa ina kongi ndina yondang tongwa de se du me kongi konzo kongi tenjin dewan juwa samu yinbi kor tendo de yondaba tongwa ina any miteke te konani nelu tombani ko te hako gris te hakona kare pengirsena soje noncho sene ene soje chiji ko de ngi zotto baso oda tendeke any penye da senanda ta ndebu tende toya yeri o tende resumbari ta te jabo la landwa luduk
Yeah, tene kembola di sumpo la tene ni chungores, ni bola tene dun chungores di tes savoko tsumaso
te junden roton korke gindwa
lasa
tendi chuni te chagone
ale las tangbo sum tene ni tene lama
Tongpo so
dun
jushene devu ninju yonjo ni te jushene devu dunju yonjo devu dumbu te juchane yon karse go devu sun tende junen koa kogiri esen.
ale
Ta tendi chuni te nye sena ani ha kogindwa.
lasa ore tangbo sumpo tenso gyu chagiores tene
Tela
di
tende devu ni legiris,
oh, ni la tene, tene dun
dum
chagiores.
legiris, dum la
Ah,
tene
las.
sun
Oh,
legiris.
oh, tacos. Tentel di zamoredwa, di ang ngayon kaliko. So the verse talks about, right, how this dependent origination, which we've spoken a lot about in the last few sessions, about these 12 links. So there's a way to divide the 12 into 3 sections. So you take the first 3, and they then give rise to the next 2. They give rise to the result of the next 2. And because of the next 2 in the succession, then the last 7 also arise. And then again, from the cause of the last 7 items on the list, the first 3 again arise. So in this way, they perpetually give rise to one another, and sort of go around and around in this way. And it says here in the verse, "There's none so precious, so profound as this." So it's said to be the most important teaching, and it's very profound. If you don't study properly dependent origination, like texts like the Mula Madhyamaka Karika and the Madhyamaka Avatara, you're not actually going to understand. And then basically, so it's saying, right, that it's important and it's very deep, it's very profound. What's the benefit of knowing dependent origination? If you know it, if you really understand this teaching, then you will understand emptiness. You will come to understand emptiness, which is the true nature of reality. And so you will be able to realize the Buddha's Dharmakaya. That's the kind of result that you will be able to get.
Laso teni teche jado chosun paki. Ta jado chosun paki palang yen lo je se di kote xe yindwa. Palang yen lo je se di lam nga xe no la galang ke ka su la nyalin shi chi de. Ta nonju nga ron so kar se right understanding do, right thought do, right speech do, right karina mombo je yewa. Ta teso rindwa. Cheson tade tanda ludu gindi long la ma korib ditong te te kakashi le xie jindwa. Tini yon genpo shomba ki tanda onta nonji la soba te sun nong la tadi nye kondu lawa nong xin right understanding, the right thought, the right speech, the right karina chochon si len rogin duwa. Ndela te te kakashi len rogin du. Ta kare ina me na Palang yen lo je te so kari inba ngote shiba to ani palang yen lo je te nyone shi guba. 아니 때 타바토지기 조인비 꼴라서 바트네지 키긴도 연도 따동 초동 소화동 전동 땡징어동 레타동 연도 동니 랑지 인라제 근데 해와 지레 감바 지에세 다데 가르 라기르세도 연도 따세야 되기 혼란게 가서 통일랑게 가서 하고 사위게 된다 내수되라 아니 galang gang ne ani tendang ngoma yimba la ngeba nyibe lo khera de la yonda tawa se la yesa ani chowa se de ta yonda bi chowa de lonso gi chowa dong ta cha jo kuma jane chowa cheba ta bu mai pa thomba thane chowa cheba ta bu mai pa chedon thombi ki kone ani saju inare e tega nongshin genju tolo ina tindeshile long sheba sheba tinde nyolin sheba te niba tene tsowa seya de ani chi nyolin sheba la semba towa yeba shin deba yeba yinba ta tinde gewa dun deba yeba te sumba she ani tenba seya de chi duju de sen la maji ba she ne mindfulness zoya shinde de yeba she ani chi duju de la sen tseji de ne sheba de la tingin zi she nga ba she tene nga seya de ta karsa gurgo mi ginda la chi xe ne tende shidu ta susu la kesong towa la soba chidu mayi pa ginda la taba la soba tobi ki chidu kolong ko ne tende shiya chi xe ba de kari reso rupa yinsa rwa
Lao.
rupa ani leji ta seya de ta ludo nga ke leka kari zona leka yapo positive ke leka tende shiba de dumba she ani yung tabi toba seya de ani chino di nyelu nguma ha kowa te la ani tseji di ne shiba tabu tenda tenda xie yi sa tate panlo yin lo je se ne tenda ki panlo yin lo je bu te lang res lam pat te nyolin she ne ani nga zo la ani taba te su to yi res da jambi kompo yin nanda shonju senbi kompo yin nanda soji ji kompo yin nanda xe zon tenda yin ba yin du ani panlo yin lo je bu te 아니 자부 대시 좀보 초롱 기 녀레zo 구그레스 에 여와 소지지 컴폰라서 봐 타바 토빅 치들라 엔텐데조로 나왔을라 말이죠.
Mm. Yes. Jadi, kempla nga ke korla karesons gentan tingzing nga di
치 해봐라 고노 야보코와 나 개반도 나기 치 야보 해긴도 세우선도 손도 매봐 옌달라 펜비치 베니피트 아더 존에
laso tene yangda to tamadi
때 녀거 기 헤라라 고기레스 녀거 녀바가 위기다 단 오늘 셔나 right understand 있어야 되는도와
ala nyamsha ki tanda rabar chagirbe.
단 녀거 그 단라 녀바가 와이나 right understanding 다 보러 단 녀거 때 오늘 데로와 기기 내루 고마라 녀바가 봐서 보러
Laso. So now we move on to verse 113, which explains the Eightfold Noble Path. Among the five paths, the path of meditation, which is the fourth, that's the occasion where one practices this Eightfold Noble Path. And so there's one list which sort of starts with right understanding, right thought, right speech, and so forth. But and that list is taught in some of Maitreya's texts. But here in Nagajuna's text, the list comes slightly differently. The words are slightly different, but anyways, it's the same topic of the list. And this verse is introducing the Eightfold Noble Path, and it's telling us how this is actually a cause for achieving liberation. And so the verse reads, perfect view and livelihood with effort, mindfulness and concentration, perfect speech and conduct, perfect thought, the path's 8 limbs. To find true peace, please meditate on these. So we start with perfect view. One meditates on the perfect view, a correct understanding of the view, after having come to a direct realization of that on the path of seeing. So path of seeing, and then comes path of meditation. Then we have livelihood, which means a perfect livelihood is one which is earned not by engaging in non-virtue, like stealing, killing animals, sewing clothes from animal skins, and so forth. Perfect effort means one has a sense of joy in practicing the Dharma, and that one is engaged in virtuous practice. Mindfulness refers to not forgetting Dharma practice. Concentration then refers to focusing one-pointedly without being distracted on practice. Then we have perfect speech, which really refers to that in the context of teaching the Dharma, one should only do so with a perfect motivation to benefit others. There should be no self-interest involved. Then we have conduct, and this refers to only engaging in things that are positive, that help other beings, other people. And then finally, perfect thought, we could also call right understanding. It's kind of similar, basically, but when you enter into meditative concentration, you have a correct understanding of what it is you're actually supposed to be meditating on. So that's what it means. And finally, then Nagarjuna gives this advice to the king that to find true peace, please meditate on these. These are what's going to really bring you to peace, O king. That's what Nagarjuna is telling us.
And chanson tama yonta bi toba la ya jindwa. Nanda kake kilana yonta bi toba la ya te ngazo chinda boji mil he guna ti tenda de heba bo korong go ya boji ha kone ani mi yinda ki tewa karile na tela le to jeni tinde rotoba ke cheshi yeju ke tinde ki yene yeju ki la yire sele tinde la yindu.
And sometimes then the last item is called perfect understanding or right understanding. And this refers to, so as a Dharma teacher, if one is to teach Dharma to others, one should really understand perfectly what it is one is supposed to explain to others. Because if one does, then whatever questions the audience may have, one will be able to perfectly answer those.
Kezo tat tende ki pala yalo jebu teso ani lam re la yera ani la yimbi ki kol keje hedu kake karse go yi chibi ki lam se ya di chogi res ani kake da nye momba teso meba zoe ki lam se ya di chogi res kake dini yang ta nyole don gang je undu miba shisa teso maje ba shinke ke ani langa chogire tende gone ani phala ye la jebote lanji demba chabare se tende la indu.
Also die nyamompa mepa zoe ki lam res tene gom gyabit kapsu majepa
Tenda
majepa
nipa
ki
de
lampa.
majiba shibi langa chogiris.
Oh, la, la.
Ene mi jinda yi chiba shibi langa chogiris. Tape na keja yabu he nga speech yabu zo tende tende lana ta mi yi chigirwa ta.
Ale las. So these this eightfold noble path is thought to be the path, right? But then about this notion of how it is the path, there are various opinions. So some say that this Eightfold Noble Path is a path that one traverses to destroy or to get rid of the negative emotions. Some say that this is um, a sort of path or a way that you don't forget while meditating. So you focus on it and you keep it in mind while meditating. And so it becomes the truth of the path in that sense. And yet others say that keeping all of these rules of right speech and right livelihood and so forth is going to make others believe. It's going to make others trust you. So there's that interpretation as well.
Tape na yon tabi tsowa se tele kanga jindowa. Sono yabu matona yon tabi tsowa se du kedon tumbi ki tsowa peche taone chi duba nyonli sheba ina. Ene pabi lang chogiris la yero. Tā tīndē yī na, ane ngā rōng tsū lāma trāwa chī nyōng shīngi tēsū, yindō jī la tēng nē, tsō wā jē nē, tā ngā tsū chī nyōng shī nē, ane tē tāpa tōbi ki jū lām chā nē, tīndē ndō guru sī kētē xē wī yé rwa. Xē sō tā tē la tē tsū nyēng kā yé rī tā. Kārsana, tā ngā tsū kī tū sōng yindō rābu tīndē yé na, ane yindō tēsū lī pē kēchā nyēmbō kē yé rī, yindō tēsū lī nyēmbā rābu pā tē nē, tsū tēlē mōyā jī tsū lēnyā jī chā kī kē yé rī. Tā lōpi tsōwa sē jī lūdū rōng kē umā rīñchīn tīmā nō lōpi tsōwa ngā kē yé rwa. Tēsō tōng rēn rō yī nyē kā kē wō jē rwa. Tēsō tōng rē sōwa yī na, yōng tōpi tsōwa tī chā mā sōwa. Ane yōng tōpi tsōwa chā mē na, ane yōng tōpi tsōwa mā yī pā tē pēshē tōng nē ngā rā wō jī tsāng kē wō jī dē nē shē bā yī na, tē tāpa tōpi lōngā chā yā lī tā kā wō chā yī ndōwa.
So here, when it comes to perfect livelihood, there is some sort of um, danger of misunderstanding this point, actually. It means that you have a livelihood that's harmonious with Dharma, and then sort of you can interpret it as having a livelihood that is harmonious in harmony with Dharma, and then using that to practice Dharma. And then you say this is the noble path. This is the cause of liberation. So then it seems like lamas and monks can sort of depend on something else, some side hustle, in order to be able to practice Dharma. And then that side activity would then be called a cause for liberation. So Kempala is talking about the example of sometimes monks and lamas have sponsors. And then in order to sort of entertain the sponsors, then they flatter them, they tell them very nice things, they give them presents and sort of hope to get more and more from the sponsors. And actually, in another text, the Jewel Garland, which is also by Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna speaks about 5 kinds of wrong livelihood. And this kind of activity actually comes quite close to that. So this would not be considered perfectly authentic. And if monks, renunciants, are engaged in this kind of activity, it doesn't mean that that is necessarily a cause for liberation or that this is the authentic path, right? So it's something to watch out for.
다 단단 잡을때 진도 신경 계속 그용 내 진도 제와 있나 나라 계속 토기를 섬비 손노티 매봐 시 아니 진도게 때운주 대용 아니 소소게 chaba mewa, hemba mewa, maungpa yung nga la jinda shiyu ki rewa dabu majawa shene, pe na nga zo hani binki, medo ne, hani de le ne, ani ko chaba mewa ndoga uri se pe gaba noshi shene, ani jinda sha ne, tsowa che ze ki, pe shong dabu long tsowa che, tsang de, chi nyongli shewa ina, teni paji yung dabi tsowa se de chao ne, ene longi denpa taba toji ki juni rindo ki sarwa, tate nga zo sono tongo ya de kachibu chao ginwa.
Meaning is that while depending on sponsors, you really should try to eradicate this thought of hoping for some benefit for yourself, eradicating the hope for receiving support from them again. So, an example is just like a honeybee sort of enters a flower and takes out the pollen or nectar or whatever, and then leaves without being attached to the flower. It doesn't remain around the flower forever. So the idea is that you should take the support without attachment, without hopes for getting more and receiving it again and again, and then leave to practice and actually use it to support some retreat or whatever, right? Then you can say that it becomes the cause for liberation and it actually becomes the authentic path, the truth of the path, right?
Tende shewa ina nga rung sule yaga yesari pe na jinda korong la kesong drabu ji gugi ye, senong drabu ji so gugi ye na jinda shebi kasu la lendo no mili rewa meba. Kar se kuru go condition meba shewa ina senong so chea yesari. Ani jinda sane roba lenki korong ke yon. Ani ko kato gari te wana tega rong le peshe tonga mato yung nga la continue su jinda shiyu ki melanda bu rewanda ja tende shewa ina jinda toya de nyurun dugi sari. Ane kang towa de le sonu kang mato soso gu chil sonu tong she de wa ina jinda mor le ugi sari. Tende nga chibu chaw ye sari.
Mhm. Susurran la rewa mena, tene jinda la,
Seno
tsukana,
chaya togi ye sari.
oh, laso,
Ta jinda de sol seno togura jinda she na.
laso.
Ane nga zo le mun tene jinda ji togu yura, mun tene jinda toya ki sonde manko wa shewa ina jinda moya togi yisar.
Mm. This is actually quite an important point because if the practitioner, if whoever is the recipient of a donation from a sponsor, if they don't have this hope for more, if they don't have attachment to whatever they're receiving, this means that there will be more merit for the sponsor, actually. And that's why anyone would set out to sponsor a monk or a practitioner, right? Because they want the merit. And likewise, from the practitioner's point of view, if they want to continue receiving sponsorship, then they need to practice. And what they practice is non-attachment and using offerings and support in a correct way. And that's actually how you continue to get support. So it's important to think about.
Karila na jinda deso ki jinda she shi yi mare, ane lama deso kyo jinda sane, ane jinda ke te go jo de len shi yi mare wa. 대게 아니 논투 제고 조긴도와 진다 가신의 대시기 말라나 아니 라마 대기 진다 될 깨자 야보게 님보게 자테 칼로테 그니 제 노시 야보 예 말이지 일라나 아니 진다 대기 빼대긴도와 아니 근데 말아봐이나 아니 진다 대 제말레기 말이 나라 뇨뇨 뭐예래 아니 랭킹 대기용 kaunte gawa tekin diba maje satisfaction maje ne taron yonjo sono ko dewaina eni toya la kanga chawar ndoya nda botende nesu yeri tade ngune roa ta chi se de ngune tende roa ngune jewa ina ko karite ona tega ronke diba shi eni koron ke yon rea maje ne te jewa ina eni koron seno kare ugi londo kare ndo gu dewa jiroa 제가 근데 ngazo kanga shidong no shene ani ngazo successful ugi munda tili ngazo yoda mombo ugi da shidong
So this becomes important because if sponsors don't know how to actually practice giving donations, and if lamas don't know how to behave correctly while receiving donations, it creates problems. For example, if the lamas actually, invite a sponsor to their place, they give them some food, they give them some tea, and they say some things that are actually in harmony with the Dharma. And if they don't display their greed and their great expectations, then the sponsors will keep coming. But if, on the other hand, they show how much they expect and how greedy they are, no sponsor will continue to sponsor such a person. They won't support someone like that. They won't see someone like that as an authentic practitioner.
tende ro te indu pena kadambil lama teso ku lain do kadambil lama ko tanda ta kadambil lama jire ta paje lor tomba yesa ye ani lor tomba ko cha yu de do ani nyima jila korongi khajute ki teri ngaron so ki jinda de choron tsala le yire da se landwa ani lor tomba ge nonju chang de du cheba de so hira 다 야보 마카 다 논조 파시 대기 sarwa 아니 론 통바기 다 전도 딜레 오나 테츠 좀마조 그레 체바 야보 칸 그레 산에 근데 조 도와 통보 아니 훌라 콘홀 또셰 통도와 콘홀 또셰 통도 다 전도 딜레 예와 체바 데 콘게와 하코드 아니 체바 데라 틀라 일루네 체바 데 조보조 제바로 아니 다 체바 야쇼데 대처리슬레 아니 public consultation 그 송도와 다른데 나와 인도 가서 진짜자네 도네이션 랭크 구긴도라 공동 제동돼서 그게 구긴도 마도 빨리 랭크에 동 땡긴 인가게 개와 조기 예미 하고야 문도와
The Kadampa Lamas would also talk about this. So in the past, there was one Kadampa Lama called Langritangpa. So he was staying in retreat, and then one day someone told him that his sponsor is going to come visit him in his retreat place. So normally he was sort of living as a yogi, living very simply, and he didn't really arrange offerings on his shrine in a very attractive or fancy way. But then he thought, oh, now since the sponsor is coming, I should make it look nice. And then he corrected his intention and said, no, actually, that's not a correct intention. And so instead, he just took some dirt, some dust, and threw that on the shrine. He made it look even dirtier than before. But actually, then he was praised for this. And this is actually a teaching that's given to illustrate how this is the best kind of offering because it's made with a pure intention. And this is how sublime beings behave. So the intention actually is very crucial.
그래서 다때 인도 나저 콜론 인텐션 라시도 코롤 얘기로 Tindu ngarong tsoge lama tugu ta soyina tu song jinda de leyi na any gamba de tsoma zoyanda bo any ji kalo yabo zoyanda bo ta nda munda hiwo ji zoyi wa ta kono yabo yena di ra ta kono yabo mewa yena any nyoda chabo zogin do ta shezon ta te indu tini pe go ba yena pe na ta nga zo luze ndabo ji ki nondula tobo shibo jilu ne enti shilo le chuki tu dewa yina eni tate pe misi ngogo gule karwa shilo le chuki tu dego she nolo tobo te ta tugi marwa meban do tugi marwa tate mini karela na lega dujo ji shilo le dama shibo ji tale nolo le sono jindo ji ku dewa yina en diba ta tugi mare sena so tugi marwa te ludu gisung ra tende shezon te indu ndeso kola ngazo sono tongu ndo ta tega se laga ba yi lazo ngal tandi kola te se kanga ye pebi lama so ki shedon te se kanga ye
Mm.
te shene eni ngen la ye
Lazo. So therefore, this intention is actually very important. So people like lamas and trukus these days, if the sponsors come, then everyone gets up to clean the monastery and make some tasty food and a lot of stuff, basically, to make it look nice. And if people who do this have a good intention, then that's positive, that's good, of course. But if not, then it might be a bit problematic. For example, you might have a begging bowl. Inside, the inner contents are very dirty, but then you just sort of scrub the outside to make it look very attractive and appealing. This is actually a very nasty thing to do because, if you present yourself in a certain way with a very pure and austere exterior, but inside you're actually stained by impure motivation, then you're not able to accumulate merit. And this is not the way of a real practitioner.
de jago gi la yi ro pop teri andar मैं मंदिर जाके के करेगा से लाये रे ते जागो के कर लाये ते दु दिबा ते सो छोरो के सन लिए ने छोरो जुबो ते लागो लो चिबा यिना पेन करी थोगी रेस ताते नो शिन रो लासो
So Indians have a saying as well, which goes something like, you know, the non-virtues are in your mind. So what's the point of going to the temple and washing your body? It's,
कोनो
it's a little
याबो
bit like
मेना से
that.
लाये रे दा
So it's talking about a person who doesn't have a good motivation, who doesn't have a good intention.
ता छिचे जादो चुगी पाते के जे ते के जिंदु ताते के लांजी देंबा ते ला मीने एनी पब देंबा से ते छोगी ये बा यिबा एन लांजी देंबा से ते ता चा चे वो यिबो को के जिंदु वा 现在东亚西巴些节话，连你根据家境的，能够把你他把老的人，得到帕朗，人了得这老死呢，他路都搞那个是都，些话是那现在东亚了都，东亚那边给这的些人，他东亚那边是的，看这这里年纪些人是都，但当俺们做个节了也别个。 품복 나보테서 동아 뎀바 된 레브 기차데 동아 뎀바레스 근데 그 동아 뎀바데 주 코네 시마르라나 세바 헤제와스두 품복 나보테서라 가보시네 차바시네 사체부 찔레 타텐데 시지 예로와 데 라테네 아니 레브 동아 뎀바데 레기예레스 품복을 차바시바데 군주 뎀바레스 아니 kunju demba de te ja chimbo res junsen karlana koi ge kanga donga kanga ani kunju demba te ne li res 다 레지 군주인한다. 예몽 군주인한다. 가리인한다. 대솔 때는 레드니 자우 체보리스. 댕고파니 타발로세도 죽군주 데바동 레브 동아 데바테 니 메바 차스와이나 애니 텔라 타바 고비 데발라기리스. 나와 소소소소이스. 애니 란테 토세도 애니 란지 덴바세야데 고부 덴바데 토바시바 타바데 토바시바게 주리스 테네 단다 카운티 셰베기 팔라연라 제보세야데라 란지 덴바세라 이리스 테소타 자부초로 하고 구그리스 오텐데션에 테니 루두게 타카르세 고르고 고부 덴바 토고예나 팔라연라 제보텔 냐레시 그루 코테소 헤스마린도아
Now we come to verse number 114, which describes the truth of the path. So we talked about how this Eightfold Noble Path is the truth of the path. And this one is considered very important. The verse reads, "To take birth is to suffer, and to crave is its immense and universal source. Make craving cease, and freedom will be yours. To achieve that, take the Eightfold Noble Path." So here it says, to take birth is to suffer, meaning that having taken birth entails suffering, the truth of suffering. And actually, the five aggregates are explained as being the result. And the truth of suffering, they have the nature of suffering. The truth of suffering is a result. And on what cause, due to what cause does it arise? It comes from craving, liking the five aggregates, being attached to the five aggregates, grasping towards the five aggregates. That is the reason that gives us this result of suffering, and that's called the truth of the origination of suffering. So it says, and to crave is its immense and universal source, its source or origination. Craving is the truth of the origination of suffering. So this is considered quite vast, the truth of the origination of suffering. All of the suffering within samsara arises due to this truth, right? The truth of the origination of suffering. And if you then remove these, both the cause and the effect, suffering and its origination, that is freedom. So make craving cease and freedom will be yours. That is freedom, that is cessation. To achieve that, take the Eightfold Noble Path. The path is the cause for cessation, for achieving that freedom. And so here, the Eightfold Noble Path is the truth of the path. So, O King, you must strive to know this, to understand this. So Nagarjuna is saying that if you want to achieve this truth of cessation, then you need to practice the truth of the path, which is the Eightfold Noble Path.
계속 단대기 덴바기 깨져도 해진도와 때 동아 덴바 세야데 동아 숨 롱히 주바들 해je로 동아지 동아 주위 동아 서지지 동아 세예로 때 동아기 동아 세야데 간데지 세기를 세도 니손순지 동아텔라 동아지 동아 세라긴도와 아니 주위 동아 세야데 ngo 나야한다고 다 셈바 마토 완다고 텐데를 라긴도와 대소 때제 하콜레 라운도와 다 서제지 동화세야데 때제 강간도와 서제 동화세야데 품보 나가 동화 그로기 바지 하코군도와 te nga zo ha hiro ko tu ye mara lo song. Ta te donga denpa rawa. Ta kunchu denpa seya te, ane le do nye mumba nyi rindu wa. Nye mumba ki kong ne hlong ne le nda wo so. Ta tende kong ane donga le yu du, tene donga kunchu yu ki ju cha so wa. Ta te kowi ki junre nda wo ji cha so wa. Tene tabi ki junre la, gopa denpa lanji denpa se xie yin do wa. Gopa seya te tanda res. Kare tari la na, para do tala wa tal, nye mumba taris. Te tawa de suk sheris na lanji denpa, shera ki cha. Ta pala yana jabu de ngon shera rawa. E tende gone denpa yisle de chawa res ye yindowa.
Jalje sungimba, rwa.
Ne,
Kare jaware, the nyomo po jal,
oh,
rwa.
negative emotion. Ngemba
Las.
zegi nong liye rawa.
So here in the verse, it talks about the four noble truths, right? The truth of suffering being the first. And within the truth of suffering, there are normally thought to be three kinds of suffering: the suffering of change, and the suffering of contaminated existence. The suffering is thought to be the kind of suffering that we face in the three lower realms. The suffering of change is basically being mentally disturbed about different things, like having a headache about how different things change. Suffering of contaminated existence is really how the five aggregates, all five of them, are of the nature of suffering. And this is maybe not so easy to understand right away, but that's how it is. So karma and negative emotions, those are the cause, the origination, based on which the result of suffering arises. So you could say that the first two truths are the cause and effect of samsara. And then we come to nirvana. Freedom or nirvana is a result of elimination or of absence. Eliminating the negative emotions, we have cessation. This is the cessation of suffering, the end of suffering. So then this is the cause and effect of nirvana, right? And this way we understand that the Four Noble Truths are the cause and effects of both samsara and nirvana.
Ta tsije jadu jenga ba, tetar popen popi denpa ye, tongwa, jile tadu tsenpa je, pongna pa ne chimba nonji jiong, kebe nyemo cho lega chi esene. Tande ludu ki chawanda boji, ludu la le yinduwa jabuki. Tene ta popi denpa ye la soba teso ki nedon teso hako. Ane pala yinla je la soba nyole shene, koa la tane taba togo e keja teso ludu choron ki la yindus. Tene nga jiten pares, nga house holder res. Ane deso kanga shene taba to kande ungi ye nas. Topanda boji le yindus la du tiki lendu la, ane tije jadu jengande. Teta papa denbe jebo se de ta tondu keba nonshi, pala yinla jebo te taba toji ki ju yinba. Ane papi denba jebo te so ke nelu ta yero meta dunga tong dame se le dunga denbi nelu jula kunju rashin kien se ne tanda kunju denbi nelu goba hewa cha ngama se ne goba denbi nelu langre driji heba ina ji se ne ta tende nesu desu kankan tong ne ene teso le zendu shi ne Any Karseguru Gota, Qualtagugiris, any Shiro Nas, to taught the Shiro Nas, any Jabochoro, Chimba Imba, Tapatogi Maris, Onoten Kogugi Maris, Chimba Yinki, Chimba Yin Yimba, Chimba Le Kola Long Share Yimba, Jiden Mena Gilega Zo Yinki Yinki, Pena Jabo Zujin Himbo Senkente, and Demba Yin Edula Soba, Hakoa Share, Tendu Zane, Yemuba Chota with the Latane, any Tabato Duek, get the years, and Jabo Deshes on Bochoro Yotenoshe, Lama La Tenshe, Tikundele Chihu, any Pala Cortes on Yolishe, any Demba Yin, Elu Tonga Soba, Bezenshena, any Choroyon, Coaltanetin, Tabato Kawa the years, de la Soir.
So here, now we move on to verse number 115. Which reads, "For you to see these same Four Noble Truths, you must strive hard to practice constantly. Even worldly men with fortune in their laps, through knowledge, cross that river, troubled states." So Nagarjuna, at this point, we can imagine that the king asks a counter question. Yes, these Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, really understanding these and putting into practice the Eightfold Noble Path, it would be very lovely, but I'm a worldly man. I'm a householder. So how would it be possible for me to practice all of these and actually achieve liberation? So here we can understand that one should come to understand the reality of each truth, such as the truth of suffering, origination, and so forth. And there are really fine details about how to do that. And actually studying these in great detail will give rise to a wish to be free from suffering. Now, Nagarjuna is saying that even worldly men with fortune in their laps, through knowledge, cross that river, troubled states. So don't think that you can't achieve liberation just because you're a householder. Even worldly men, even householders, can cross the river of negative emotions if they really put forth great diligence in practicing the Eightfold Noble Path. And he's telling the king that, you have met gurus, spiritual friends, and you have gained knowledge about the Eightfold Noble Path. So if you practice with effort, then you will be able to reach that result.
그래서 단디 걸 손은 또야 같이 붙여기를 침바 포무 미샤티 속에 가게게 나조게 다바 토투기 말에 나조기 체야버서 투기 말에 나조 니샤 아리 지데빌레가 레가 텐데레세 가게 손은 공개 예로와 그래서 다때 디콜 손은 동구근도 지제데 루두기 손텔이 시시네 소소소소 인카르메치 조구근도.
So some people might feel this way. Some householders in particular might think that, we're unable to practice really well, and so we won't be able to achieve liberation. We have to hold down our worldly job. But then we should remind ourselves about the message that Nagarjuna is promoting in this verse, and we should encourage ourselves, actually, take heart.
다치제 자도 주루파 건도 칭예 지바 대다종 너네 바바 말로 로도긴 사르 네데 말로 대다게 녀모롤레 시오 코나웨 셀라긴도와 단데 가리히긴도 세두 용조 루드게 자보데시 좀볼라 인카르멘트 지조긴도와 가리 조긴도 라와이나 건도 칭예 지바 대다종 세두 다 녀마 다정비 컴포토 찬키 요나 쇼주 셈바차 찬키 다 리버레이션 조 찬키기 건조 대소 베나 야부주지 니보타브로와 Teso Tegatse Kanga Maja, Chi Nyole Maje, Lama Le Mate, Patinde, Nonga Nema Pagabanda Wutinde Maris, Chapa Papa Noji, Nonga Nema, Chapa Papa Noji, Tinde Shuya Maris. And Loto Yindu Sedu Yon, Teso Sane, to Loto Naron to Gitanga Loto to Lengiroa, Tende Dabu Shegaba Maris, Tangaba Tende Maris. Dona Tata Taba To Sanki, Public Gonza Cha Sanki, Da Cha Saba, Da Jamba Cha Sanki Teda, Nye, Naronso no she Soso Shio Tamapa, Nye Mumba, the Joki Don Kodo Naja Yanki Konar Deris, Yina Yon Kozo Lama Give Hini La Sobala Ten, any Tene Chi Hu, any Lama Chi no Gobade, Lonely to Nyole She, Tendation, any Kozo Papa Cha Swari, any Choro Yon. 아니 오야 일이 엔 저런 게 센티시 거야 예말 티켓이 되긴도
Now, verse 116 reads, "And even those who realized the truth did not fall from the heavens, nor emerge like crops of corn from earth's dark depths, but once were ruled by kleshas and were ordinary men." So here again, Nagarjuna is encouraging the king. He's saying that even those who realize the truth, those who in previous times became arhats or bodhisattvas, who actualized liberation, freedom, who reached freedom from for themselves, they didn't do so without putting up effort, without practicing, or without attending on a teacher. They didn't simply fall down from the sky like rain. And they're also not like crops. So we harvest the crops in the fall, right? They didn't just sort of pop up like plants out of the ground. The ones who became arhats and bodhisattvas and so forth, all of them were just like us. They were ruled by kleshas and were ordinary men. They were like us. They had negative emotions overflowing in their minds. So anger, jealousy, ignorance, desire, and so forth. But then they met with gurus, they received Dharma teachings, they practiced those teachings, and then they became noble beings. So, O king, there's no need to worry. It's possible.
Pena Naronso Jetsen Mela Repate, Tene, Ko Pemisi Diba Mombo Zonki, Henotabu Hivujiro, Yena Teni, Lama Maba Tu Shene, any Maba Ge Keja Dongote so La Ishi Shene, any Sande Chil Kanga She Tendeshene, any Chejiluji Soje Chabarawa, that Tendenda was on Oton Digindo.
So we can think about Milarepa too. Milarepa was someone who did a lot of very heavy non-virtue. But then he met his guru, Marpa. He received training from Marpa. He received teachings. And finally, he focused his practice in retreats and he achieved Buddhahood in one lifetime. So we can think about that example.
That's it, Jadu Judenki Kejate. You don't tell a mont to so chinsa. Pembe, Donga, Tambon de la de, Cheji, Tundurzeji, Jandenji, Sen Chijiza, Labor Sunsini. Can they chijen de he, ta hitting it and out the Dudurshene, any tig essence and double, pit station double, Donga double de he is at it. It's a chiburisha. Ta Jabo Choron. Jibal Tasaris, Jabu la any Tonga Yemaris, Jabula, Jabo Yinsana, ta Kusum don any Dabu Jabole, Kusum Mamedo, the Kaze, Mombo Yero attende in Jibali, Hira Yemara, Sheza, Jiba Menke, Jabo Choron, Lata Nagi Ludunga, Keja Mombo Hena Chomundus, Keja Mombo Hejimes. Geba Hira Mundus, 다 천대도 심한 강가라 펜 토비 깨져지 해인스 된도 님보다 쪼다고데 해인스 데가르라나 다 조로 게와지스 디파마지스 엔 조로기 사이데 좀보예바지 지스 엔테 존센다고데 가르라나 소제 존덴데 산데 좀보예 산데 ndurtu 다보제 토와이나 데 nombichegi tsawa nimbodabu ibade suyeres entende noro naselavar.
So now in verse 117, Nagajuna gives some very pithy advice to the king. He says, "O fearless one, what need to tell you more? For here's the counsel that will truly help. The vital point is tame your mind, for mind's the root of Dharma," so the Buddha said. This verse, this sort of very brief, pithy instruction, is really like the essence of this whole text of the letter to a friend. So he says, "O king, fearless one," since he is already a king, then he doesn't really have a lot of troubles in his life. There's not much that could possibly threaten him in any way. So there's no need to tell the king a whole lot. But rather here's the counsel that will truly help, something that's going to be helpful for the next life, something beneficial, truly beneficial. And the advice is, the vital point is tame your mind, for mind's the root of Dharma, so the Buddha said. The essence of Buddhism, we could say, is don't do any non-virtue, practice virtue, and tame your mind. So this is the root of Dharma. That's what the Buddha says. So please do that. That's Nagarjuna's request.
Semba zombo shiguru se kete de kiindoa.
And
Ta
it's
ina
very
yo
less.
semba zombo se de tanda tuze dujo imbarwa. Semba zombo she tana yo jompu yesare. Ta semba zombo shedon de hako gu yesarwa. Semba zombo de sozo gu nolo le shede nan di yesare. Slow le nonju ten le zo le shigoya tende yesamare. Shilo le semba zombo indon do chene chi ni mbo zo dewa ina migi 200 chene ani kale te yerwa sozo gitu do namba kundu dedu ina rodu ina da kadu ina da semba zombo chene migi kola negative kol sono mato ani senche kare ina neba jugi sono mato mela maja lega maje ani semba zona sadon la zona sa da butezo tendo hakwa she de ani dide yesare tate shiro no se la yesarwa ngazu kangala.
So most importantly is emphasizing this point that we should be kind. We should be kind-hearted. And the problem is maybe nowadays we're in a quite vicious point in time in history. So if you go around and you try to be kind and nice to everyone, maybe you'll run into problems. Maybe people try to take advantage of you or something. So maybe the appropriate way to behave is to always keep kindness in your heart inwardly. But externally, maybe sometimes you need to speak roughly, sometimes you need to behave in a certain way just because that's required in the situation, right? But always be kind inwardly in your heart. Don't do or think or say anything bad, anything that's harmful to others, and instead try to help them. So, like it said, if the intention is good, the stages and the grounds will also be good. So, this advice about keeping a good heart, it's really for all of us.
Chidon ko 단다 semba zombo seyade ta ngazo che zo se na semba zombo shi zo ya del sigiro ta semba zombo se du semba zochi je gugiro semba zombo se du semba zombo mai ba de semba zombo ya zo zochi je gugiro zochi je de la che se tendo de zochi je de ro damar se tendo de chezo che zo guru se la du che kare zo guru se ki la wa na semba zombo zo guru semba zombo kande zo guru du eni ta gewa ji diba ma ji ta teso shine shia dirindo ngune shewa ina.
In general, when we talk about this good heart, practicing Dharma means to have a good heart, actually to make our heart good. So Dharma has this connotation of sort of fixing or mending. That's the real meaning of Dharma, to mend our heart, to make our hearts kind, and then to practice virtue and not to engage in any non-virtue. That's the real, actual meaning of Dharma practice.
Shason te indu dama se te hold lagindo an zimba sidu ngeson sun la mando wa shia te layer wa ta semba dujo she na ngeson sun dogiro wa semba yabu she na ngeson sun mando wa hold zogindo wa shason tendo de kogindo wa.
Dharma, then, it means to hold. And actually, it holds us from going to the three lower realms. If we have a real good heart, we won't go there. It's only if we have bad intentions, if we have ill will, that's what really takes us to the lower realms. So this is, it kind of gels together with the etymology of Dharma as well.
소제 존데 치지 자와 인스 때 소리 라야데 단다 가조 다마팔라 치지 치지 제바테 소리 수기여와 센두와니 레바데 센두와니 데완데 라소바 치톤제 생기 제슨 도기레 센데 다부제 토와이나 데와 토기레 센데 다부제 마도 노일 호소이나 동아 오기레세 다 공제 강가 생기 제바레세 뜻게제 데린도와 계속 센데 다부시야 제데 칼레 카쇼로와 센 다부제 고야데 nengo cheshuro ata nomba soje bilu sola.
The Buddha said it's the root of Dharma. And in the Dhammapada, the Buddha spoke about this, right? Taming the mind is bliss. Everything follows the mind. All dharmas follow the mind. So basically, the mind creates everything. Suffering comes from the mind. Bliss, happiness also comes from the mind. But then to tame this mind, that's the most difficult thing, actually. But at the same time, it's the most crucial thing in the Buddha Dharma.
Oda tenderecha. Tani tije jadu choje bagi. Chela teke domba konlate. Pepar gelo kejon jibaka. Dile kongi shebi ngote. Yete tembe kunse tenye des. Ta ludugi sungere jabu deshe zombo choron la nye kondu tije mombo gone ta donga laja mombo hiboji xe iris. Ta ina laja teso yonsu zopa choron migi gelon radu shunwa. Chi chibo majo lega lejo menki teso ko duka lekhabu iris. Ani choron lega mombo yidu tele cho duka lekhabu iris. Ina yon donga mombo xe goban deso le koyon ruwa kakhe ji en choron nyole she lali tu tuwa ina en tende ki nyole she goba te ki jine choron la yade mombo ji le ugires Any chorongi mesete tayeba, many puyebaji, chogiri, shazam, any tesokol sonotoro naasilavar.
Now, verse 118 reads, "It's hard enough for monks to follow perfectly all these instructions that I've given you, yet practice excellence, the very pith of one of these, and give your life its sense." So Nagarjuna says, "O king, Dijizampo, I've taught you a lot of different advice coming from the sutras in all of these verses of this text. But even monks, even bhikshus who have no job and who only practice Dharma, it's hard even for them to practice everything that's contained in this text. But if you're able to practice just the essence, then many good things will come to you and you'll be able to make your life meaningful." So that's what Nagarjuna says.
Shazata kuse tayeba ungiri, tayeba zoroji lana, any tanjoji milu rumbochi te, hoka imba hako ala subikone, pesha yabutong shewaina, sendela yon, any seringwa neme baso tende ungi, jema yon, sojeji kompon totu gire, senje la pen totu gire, any kuse tayeba chawre sen lawarawa.
If we're able to make this life meaningful, so this life, it refers to this precious human life with all of the freedoms and advantages. If we're able to use it well, then even within this life, we will have good results. We will have a long life, we'll have no sickness. And in our following lives, we will be able to reach the level of full Buddhahood and we'll be able to really help sentient beings.
다 지제 자도 쭉구동 예구동 예구 짜치데서 말라고야리죠. kunji gewa kunla yeronghi niki lebar sheba nansunyo soje nito jile yonghi ne tene gewi pumbundi che shewa padu meba la miyi jiten kunji nanjo onze ne paba shinre zion sheba yi shewo nyato mumbu jizunte tune nagan decho hidon na sade soje hindu chondende eba medon rawan jitenji genbo kutse padu meban zes la shebarwa. Tande ki kari la yer se du, ta kondu donga teso kankan go tseo she, tende she ne, ene tibar chimbu ke chiba ji chaba she ne, ene tibar chimbu ki chiba teso ki shidong ki lega tende legu gires. Ke kari legu se du, kunji gewa kun la yerong ke se du, soso shewo ki gewa inanda, da chambu ki gewa inanda, ron sunje ki gewa inanda, sugi inanda gewa zo sacho ki gewa teso la, ado drensen maje ne, ene jeso yeron she le, senge yeron she ne, pe yabu re se le, tende shi jute, ta nengo chaba re la bare. Jeso yeron she gures. Tene jabo choron ke yon, lunga ye songe, ta gewa tende so eres. Shasan ti gewa teso, senje teso, soje tobu ki chidu la, ane patego gugures, ngo gugures, jingo gugures, danzo gugures, lendo nomi rewa mebala. Tene ta yabo ungires. Tene ta gewa jachimbo gaba, tene shia gaba tigi tudo nubala tene, ene jabo choron maungpa, kasego shewa pado mebaji, ring, Shava Pada Mebala, any Lado Miki, Jide Kang Kungla Le Shene, any thing in Zendong, Ihila so Yede Mumboji Yeva, Shene, any Papa Shinre Ziki Senchi Tesukin Roden Sheba no Shinji, any Senjil Roden Shene, any Senji Kanga Yinki, Donga Yinki Mumboji, Jesu Zune Dabu Jene, any call Yone Yondoko, Shewa Lane, any Senchi Yendo Tesuke, Nawado Gawa Don Dejo Kedon Kundo Ngajala Sakanga, Meva Gilega Zostoa She, any Tatu, any Sojaji Hin, the Jabu Choro, Jonden de Ebomi Don Dawa Abutinde Shene, and Jitenk Kandela, because the hearing the Gusha Shene, that Negone, any Charlotte non Guguri, Senjil Penta Guguris and the Lando Gindwa. Alatas are a rainbow line, but
Lazo. Riserera. Now we will read the next 3 verses all together. Rejoicing in the virtuous deeds of all, now dedicate your 3 good kinds of acts to all, that they may come to Buddhahood. Then by this mass of virtuous deeds may you, in boundless lives, in worlds of gods and men, be master of the yoga of all excellence, and like sublime Genresik, may you work to guide the many feeble, stricken souls, and thus may you take many rebirths and dispel all ills, old age, desire, and hatred in a perfect Buddha field. May you have infinite life as a protector of the world, like Buddha Amitabha, sublime Lord of boundless light. So, when it comes to virtue practice in the context of the Mahayana is what's been taught in this text. That's how to practice virtue. And there's virtue that has been practiced by ordinary beings, by Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, whoever created a certain merit or virtue. One should rejoice in that without any kind of jealousy. This is considered extremely important. And now, you, the king, you have gained some merit, actually. So it says, rejoicing in the virtuous deeds of all, now dedicate your 3 good kinds of acts. You have gained some merit, and now please dedicate that in order for all sentient beings to be able to achieve Buddhahood without any kind of hope for some return or any good result for yourself. So then it says, right, to all that they may come to Buddhahood. Then by this mass of virtuous deeds may you, in boundless lives, in worlds of gods and men, be master of the yoga of all excellence, and like sublime Chenresig, may you work to guide the many feeble, stricken souls. Based on the force, on the power of the merit that you have generated, may you, in the future, in innumerable lifetimes, go to the higher realms and act just like the noble beings, like Avalokiteshvara do, and help beings, hold them with your compassion, all those beings who are afflicted by suffering, and may you be able to take care of them. So, and thus may you take many rebirths and dispel all ills, old age, desire, and hatred in a perfect Buddha field. May you have infinite life as a protector of the world, like Buddha Amitabha, sublime Lord of boundless light. So, even manifesting your own Buddha fields, where you can help sentient beings in this way over an innumerable amount of future lifetimes.
and they Sumbo Deki, Jesu yerong shijute nenga imba she yirte ngarong sola nenga cho yiri. Jesu yerong she tuba yina sosos ke kanga ja magi bala geyu sawa momboji zo tugire se soje chonden deki sunruwa. Shezan ta de indu ngarong so chiba indu mi yinda ke lega yabu kanda kang zogi yeba yina. Keju yabu zogi yenanda, pesha joya lega yabu zogi yenanda, Gemba je lega yabu zogi yenanda, jinda shine lega yabu zogi yenanda, kora jene lega kari na tesolo jiso yeron shene, hado maje wa shijute, nenga kibuji chabari. Jiso yeron sheba ina, gewa sogi re, diba yongi re, gewa pegi u re labar.
These three verses tell us about how it's important to rejoice. And this is extremely important for us to note as well. And the Buddha's taught that if we can rejoice in others' virtuous deeds, then without having to do a lot of hard work ourselves, we can actually gain a lot of merit. So if we are Dharma practitioners, if we call ourselves Dharma practitioners, then whatever good, virtuous activity others are engaging in, like if they're good at translating texts or building monasteries, doing kora, circumambulations, it's important to really not have any jealousy and from a very pure heart try to rejoice in their virtuous acts. This will earn us a lot of merit, and it will also make our merit increase. That's how it's taught.
Karsana rejoice ya de junse kachibu imba de penata ngazo payu tesola malin tundu se sogirwa, malin turen dengi erwa. Ta malin tundu sonke do kodi shinki tesola, koso pesha zoi chiduri se enda wotende thado dese maje ne, yabu hibori se semba tine lawa ina, malin tunjin dengi penye de sosola toya yiris. Ten pemisi nenga chibunda, malin tunjin den toya ina, en cheze ombo kusunruwa, nyawala ndo gugu maris. En tega noshi pena, ngazo ma jigirwa, ma jedu, nyenpa zekunu lara, ma teso sonon tunne, konon chi kune, ma jane, ma jaki miki sega waina, ma rela mere sebi ki nipa te ungiris. Tati nenda wore, shezo jiso yiro shishite nenga chibore.
La tamadi ma kola.
Pena ma teso ki, ma jaki miki sena, ma rela mere sebi nipa te ligindwa.
Ala,
Kozo sono den tunne lega te shebarwa. Shetan sono tunne jisu yirung shega oidu, ene geyu zawa de toya yiris.
mm.
Te kawa lensarwe.
Tamadi nga ma gyala na.
Pena nga zo dan zingirwa, ma jegirwa. Army.
Alelas. Oh, re.
Ene
Kine?
army ki me jahe dao ki sega na, kozo
Ala.
kanga sono ki pa shene lega de zoa yinsan, army
Alelas.
rere ra mi rere seyu nipa de togiris. Seya chi madu seya
Ale,
nere.
las. Oh,
Shedon
tabi
chumbi
sang.
gone,
Oh,
jisu
re.
yirung shede na, me mumbo ge 말은 두두 손에 쉐가지고 돈도 찌기 배에 저런 라 독일이스.
So, for instance, in Nepal, some people organize things like a Mani Dungdrup, which is like reciting ta dung lana saya kya chagirbe mane.
다 인사해요.
Oh, that's so that is something like 100 million Om Mani Padme Hum mantras. And if one is able to really
More
say
than 100 million 인지로와.
probably more than 100 million, a lot of mantras. So they get together and collectively recite a lot of mantras. And if we're able to say, oh, that's excellent, I'm so happy that they're doing that, and really rejoice wholeheartedly, without saying like, they're probably just doing it for money, then you can gain a lot of merit equal to the ones doing it, in fact. There are a lot of benefits to reciting the Mani mantra. Jamye Khyentse Wangpo said that if you can recite that many, then actually you won't have to be born in the lower realms. So it's actually something like an army where every individual soldier each have the intention to kill. And once they kill someone, they all get the same karma of killing whoever that may be. And if you rejoice in what the army is doing, you also take part in that karma. So rejoicing has this kind of power. So if we rejoice in something virtuous, we receive a share of that merit as well.
Ini ta nga zo ngowa zo so ngowa. So so ge gewa kare she na ngowa shi jite nengo che wo jiri. Ta ngowa ya shu te senji yindo suje tobi ki do gewa ngogo ya te yabori. Se la so o te ka che wo ji cho yire nga ro zo chiba zo yi na. Ngowa shi jite. Ngowa shi ya te te go ya te dan shi ya te rida.
Then we have dedication. It's a really important point that whatever virtue we create, we have to make sure to dedicate it. And here in these verses, we learn that the best is to make a dedication so that others can achieve Buddhahood. So to give away your own merit.
Iyo kake ki sono kogura nga ki merit de milte go na nga liye mari se te mari milte mi soje tobi chi de te wa ina an chorong ki merit de taro moron rogi res pe na nga ron so pesha de bengulo lu go na any interest chano pesha moron do no shi res.
And some might think here that, oh, if I give away all my merit, then I'll be left with none. But actually, it's not like that. It's more that your merit increases and you'll have more than you had before. It's like receiving the interest on money that you've put in the bank.
Ini tije uma de gi shinre zi no shi shine senjin ki lega de zo gure la so shinre zi ki senjin ki lega de kande shi yir la na ko abu ki senjin te so ki ta kar se guru go tanga te so le ta ne ni ji shine senjin ki tan shi yire ani nyawa be ki senjin te so nyawi donga te so nyodon ko te so so no to ne ani senjin le shamba don shonju sen de ni ji la so ko ne no ne roba shi yire wa ta nga zo yo te no shi ji zo shi ki gu ndo wa.
And then the last line says, just like Avalokiteshvara, you work for beings. So how does Avalokiteshvara work for the benefit of beings? Avalokiteshvara observes the problems of all kinds of sentient beings and then accomplishes their benefit. So, for example, Avalokiteshvara regards the hell beings with love and compassion and then works for their benefit. So this is what we need to do also, actually.
Te indu nga zo pe na so so gu donga de la so no ton to wa ina nginju le wa le pen to gi res. Me yenda ge senji te so donga le so no to na ni je ki nyon le wa la pen to gi res. Ta shi tene da wo shi gu ndo wa.
So then, if we can think about our own suffering, this will help us to have renunciation. If we are able to think about others' suffering, this will help us have compassion.
Konje ta ni je do shonju ki san te so za chi bo yin ba hi wo ji he ye de. Ani nonju shonju ki san te la jabu ta bi shonju ki san ani toba ta bi shonju ki san zigu ta bi shonju ki san se te he gin do wa. tanda ludu ki tso gyabo tabi shungkyu ki san se de la embassy zo yera gyabo tabi shungkyu ki san de soje chanden de ye jela yebe ki shungkyu ki san da wo de la yer.
So it's essentially saying that compassion and bodhicitta are very important. There are three kinds of bodhicitta, being king-like bodhicitta, captain-like bodhicitta, and shepherd-like bodhicitta. And out of these, it seems that Nagarjuna is emphasizing the king-like bodhicitta, which is the kind of bodhicitta the Buddha, the Bhagavan Buddha had.
Da yindao de zo pe na zigu tabi senshi de shire zigi senshi da wo. Ene chuba tabi senshi de genpo shamba ki senshi tabi tende xie xi yer. Da de zo kare ye ba zo ne ene senshi nyongli shi de na shi tuba ina ndi de yer.
Drupa tabaki semkede sula yore.
Genpo shamba ki jela ye bi senshi da
Last.
wo. Insari.
Okay.
Da tende lagin do kaji ba de zo ki.
Last. So then when it comes to the others, it seems that Avalokiteshvara had the shepherd-like bodhicitta, and Maitreya had the captain-like bodhicitta. That's how it's said.
Da tije jadu nye ku zonyi ba. Kera suren tongju chashin tima me. Layu nanga tongni sadin jenze ne. Sala me don tori lani nashung cho. Dege gawa ngipa radun zes. Tende lagin dowa. Radun ze tes. Ta tije oma de ma cho gugiye sari. Nyemo nyata senchi tsoji jishe tong. Chewa henze jayi ombo nyi nye ne. Jiten lende miza hila me nyeba. Medre nomba menga kompon nyeban zes. Ta zondo gindowa. Ta de kar lagir se du. Son je tsadu. Debu ngin du chu tsadu. Pena pabi konza cha tsadu. Ani shale kande no gugiye ba. Ti ko di ke yindowa. Ke yindu. Tombo kare gugur lana. Shera sayade nelu tobi lo. Chi nonji nelu shingi lo te la shera se. Tusen se du. Mege chupon ke gone. Soje ki trensu ga ju tusen sayade. Tenen tongwa lana. Mi yinda la. Yinba tongwa. Tenen traba lana. Yeden mombo yebe ki traba. Ani tema miba se du. Lunga ye son la shen meba. Ta tende teso kanga ritsa rawa ta pabi konzo cha sana. Tene tende ki yeden teso ye ne. Ani pena sunju tsasung la ne. Tende ndabo. Teso la si yer ta. Ta tada do yentron onshu sen rabo tende yerwa. Tende ndo ne. Ani roden ze gugres. Tene mi shewa lo ne satin do shena yo roden ze gugres. Sa la me da on seteri. Mi kor. Zombili kola. Ani ting la roden shi gugres. Ani tori la se du la kor teso. Tene la ki pume nashung zema tende yesarwa. Ta tende ndabo teso la lula dewa yeba. Sen le gawa yeba. Ta chidon tende ndabo yerwa. Ta teso ki gone yo, tese kangan dabu tre yesarwa. Tene kangan teso meba zoa la soa, tende shole nonguris. Ta tombo tsije tombo de tende dabu jinsar.
So now then we have verses 122 and 123. And they read, and springing from your wisdom, discipline, and bounty, may your fame and stainless virtues spread throughout the God's realm in the sky and on the earth, and may you firmly quell the carefree ways of gods and men, whose sole delight and joy is pretty girls. And once you've reached the mighty Buddha state, removing fear and birth and death for hosts of stricken and afflicted souls, then let mere name be stilled beyond the world, and reach the never-changing level, free from fear that knows no wrong. So here, this verse is talking about after one has achieved Buddhahood, after one becomes a noble being, what kind of activity will one sort of manifest? So the verses are discussing that. So what do you need, first of all, in order to become a noble being? You need wisdom, wisdom which understands reality just as it is. Discipline. You need to possess discipline, which consists in abandoning the 10 non-virtuous deeds. Bounty, meaning generosity, giving freely to others. Fame, fame in the sense of being renowned for having many good qualities. And then it says stainless. Stainless meaning there's no issue, there's no fault, whether in body, speech, or mind. And actually, all of these are present if you're a noble being. So it says, and springing from your wisdom, discipline, and bounty, may your fame and stainless virtues spread throughout the God's realm in the sky. So, like the heaven of the 33, after one has reached this kind of level, one will actually be able to go there and act for the benefit of beings in that particular place. And on the earth, so one is born as a human being, helping beings on the earth. And may you firmly quell the carefree ways of gods and men, whose sole delight and joy is pretty girls. So there are, in these realms, divine girls and human girls, right? So it seems that some gods and men probably run into trouble because of having too much attachment and too much desire. So help to sort of remove all of that desire. And then it says, and once you reach the mighty Buddha state, removing fear and birth and death for hosts of stricken and afflicted souls, then let mere name be stilled beyond the world and reach the never-changing levels, the level free from fear that knows no wrong. So I think maybe Kimball is now going to explain the second verse.
다 지제 자도 니그 자순 바데기 네카스 세예사로와 타바토 산에 다정바 차차네 나타 손주선바 차차네 네카스 nye mumba nyata ke senchi so sidu nye mumba da jo ki don kondo nga jo ki kanga ye dengi ngo na dengi ta anjo sa dengi senti ye dengi da bo ta kanga donga mumbo yenki te so don teni jito tende ye dengi te so an jito me ba ki lega te so shigures donata karse gurugo tu mai bi ke hia ke kanga ye ba da bo te so la teso kanga deso meban ze gures. Tene choro sojeji kompo te to tsares. Te indu tene jiten le nde tsares. Sojeji kompo se ya ten jiten le nde tsares. Tan jiten le nde tsares zadu sabato chekbe ki pumbo teso ta choron la ye mares. Tene mi tsares edu ta kanga chi tonje melan noshin ha ko tsares. Tene Kewares, ta dongashi yemaris. Tine ko jito yemaris, kanga yemaris. Tine gen roya yemaris. Tine karse go shikin roya yemaris. Ta cheshi mumbu hibu yemi ki kompon te tosa res. O tende res la yesar ta. Koso e.
Lao.
Dade ma la do, eni zo do gindo.
Lado. So then it says, um, removing fear, right? Once you reached Buddhahood, then in the short term, you're able to remove the fear of sentient beings. So sentient beings have a lot of suffering. Um, they may have worries, ear pain, nose pain, headache, and so forth. So one is able to remove the fear of suffering actually by teaching, right? Removing fear and birth and death for hosts of stricken and afflicted souls, leading others to liberation, etc. And then one reaches this level which is beyond the world. One has reached Buddhahood. So one no longer has these contaminated aggregates anymore. The never-changing level, this level which has so many positive qualities, in which there's no aging and no dying, no change, right? Which is also free from fear, that knows no wrong. There's no suffering there. So it's blissful. And one realizes that everything is just like a dream.
A sije jadu chu sun ye chu ge, ludu ki sun hibit se ten se ade, zo sons. Teni hibit ten sun kente, ludu re, sunsa de, jabu deshi zomboli sumbare. Teni ludu ki jago leja ke ne sun roa, ta ngaron su tanda peke le tonya ye chu te, eni lo tawa karse pasa nima trapa senki te ton, eni lo tawa tonche chi mihla se ya tenki te su tsu peke li ju shene, e tende shun go ba chi res.
So that concludes this text, the letter to a friend, which has 123 verses. The author of this text is Nagarjuna, and the one who he taught it to is the king, Dechizampo. So Nagarjuna actually composed this text in Sanskrit, in the Indian language of Sanskrit, and then later it was translated into Tibetan by the Lotsawa Gawapaltsek.
Eni ludu don jabu deshi zimbo ni dewa kante shuru la na, ludu shiong dami yu le pepe ki longa la, pugu imbi kasu la deshi zombo te tu ne, eni ludu ki deshi zombo ki laba lai tas ya jera nga zo pepa la, lai tas, farm reading siya jera laba tani. Tende zone, eni ludu ki choro mao pa jabu chasa res, tende she la she ne, eni hiu la deshi zombo te jabu cha. Ta tende she ne kozo ni ngohe cha ne, robo yinba re, eni jabu deshi zombo de shizu ludu ki jenda yinba re, ta tende she ne dewa shunjo re. Eni ludu ki yige yi tiba re, hebi tenyi la ya chi do rinchin tima se ya chi. Hebi tenyi se ya de ta rinbol tong ya, rinchin tima se ya de ta nyesa le, ya jo tende she jo shunwa re.
So Nagarjuna and the king, they came to know each other while Nagarjuna was traveling, and they met at the time when the king was still a child, actually, had not yet become a king. And so Nagajuna did palm reading. He made a prophecy based on reading the palm of the king. And so he predicted that, oh, in the future you may become a king. And they sort of came to know each other from that point. And then later he, of course, became a king, and he also became Nagajuna's sponsor. And there were two letters, actually, two texts that were originally sort of letters sent by Nagajuna to the king. One is this, Nagajuna's letter to a friend, and the other one is the jewel garland, the Ratnavali. So this one is more sort of intimate, whereas the jewel garland is maybe a little bit more distant in the tone, basically, of the text.
Teni tateri distant the paji letter to friend injury ta ina digiro.
Vale, más.
Ene ludu ngaron so soju jitemba la karin chebo shebo jire. Kandere lawa ina ta ngima shiro mutipi ge loben kedo chebo. Nanda ina loben pawo se shera soju ba zengi jiro. Kong loben pawo de nomba soje ba cha chunki de ludu ke karin ne shunwari. Loben pawo ge riba mumbo tse she ne nombi ge lamatawa mumbo kanga te tende shere. Tini loben pawo ge ama de nomba le ganki ji insarwa. Tini loben pawo choron da nomba ge kepa chimbo chun nongshi yinke teso tsalando ne tseba tai. Eni choron jaga tona tini kero chibo chogire mado chu chunju nongshi kepa chunju teso tsali tseba jaga to de na pento ya ye mare la ne. Eni ko nalenda le chimba res. En nalenda ndone tseba jashene kale kabu chabore nalenda ki nombe pento ta teso. Ta tende shenen disa mare la ne ta ludu dendi kugu hindus nalenda la lobe pau chali tseba jela. Tene ludu ke Roma aya dewa yedu ta ludu choro mandu ngandos. Sedu tene ludu ke lobe aya dewa la riba kanga la tadi she tan disa res lobe aya dewa te nalenda la nga shene. Tene lobe aya dewa yimba hakugi ma te tene lobe pau ke kugi chutto ne ani laga zogi ro. Tene lobe aya dewa ki che kare zogi sedu nge shibo teso la penta wichido la ani chutor ndangi ye la warwa. Tene ka tedu aya dewa ki chu lu warwa. Ta chu ko ne saji kona chu lu ne tene shidu ani lobe pao ki cho kare zogi sedu tene nga ki lojo lumba la hindong ji ye te shewi ki ta la ani chu lu gi ye se la warwa. Tene lobe pao ki che mikuba hibores hindong de lojo le yere chundel luna kawan digire la du. Ene aya dewa ki pao la la ra che kubares mishi sadu ene ndel chutto ne chutto den shi pen togru se de kubares la re. Ene te kanga chorwa. Tene yo kase ta yo chul ndone tu jane tende shene diba togires la shebarwa. Ene ka te du aya dewa ki yo kongi yo ta karse taji nge pe jila imba ten no shire luze no le chalo tsobo mumbo lu ne ani shiro le tu ja she de warwa tile yo lobe pau aya dewa tal le ne che kare shi yi se la du nge tsobo meba zoya ki taji shi yi se du o ta che kubare tsobo no lo shiro tu ja na kande ugur la du tini yo aya dewa klaro ani choron ki tu je de kuba hibore diba sengi nono le yere zoboto na pegi masene ta tende shene ene ta kozo ni tseba mombo ja tini lobe pao ge yon aya dewa kol tseba jengi risha san ta tseba ja ja ene hule lobe pao de pane ene nomba soje be tawa she ene soje ge la pe teba yenki chawa tende she te tawa luduki menga do ludu ka karil shuwa yimba ludu de soji jiten bala tsa chibo yimba ka chibo yimba tende ludu ya yeris dala tugure
Lazo. So Nagarjuna is someone who's considered very to have been very beneficial to the Buddhist teachings. In the past, there was this famous teacher, um, Acharya Aryashura, or Lopan Pao in Tibetan. And it was because of Nagarjuna that actually this famous and great scholar was converted to Buddhism. So he was a great scholar, Aryashura, and he was everywhere sort of defeating Buddhist panditas, Buddhist scholars in debate. And someone told him that, just defeating all of these lesser panditas in debate is not going to lead to very much. You should go to the real center of learning.
koronga amaglare
His mother actually gave this advice to him that you should go to Nalanda and there, defeat the great scholars of Nalanda, then you'll have great fame. Um, so then the student of Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Nagarjuna sort of taught him whatever reasoning he should use, whatever logic and arguments he should use against Aryashura. And then Aryadeva was sent to Nalanda to debate. And so there are many sort of instances where they met. So at one point, Aryashura was sitting around and making water offerings for the benefit of those who had already passed away. And so at some point then later, Aryadeva was standing around and pouring water on the ground. And then Aryashura asked him, what are you doing? Oh, well, there's a tree in the southern continent in a different country. And so I'm pouring some water for the benefit of that tree. And then Aryashura said, well, that's stupid. The tree is not here. It's in another country. It's in the south, right? So how could this water help? And then Aryadeva said, no, actually, you're the stupid one, because how do you think your water offerings are going to help someone who has already passed away? And then there's also this custom, maybe among higher castes, among Brahmins, to wash the body with water. And so Aryashura was probably doing this practice. And so at some point, Aryadeva was sitting around with a pot filled with shit, with very impure substances, and he was wiping the outside of the pot very carefully. And so Aryashura came up to him and said, "What are you doing?" And Aryadeva said, "Well, I'm cleaning the pot. It's very dirty." And so Aryashura told him, "Oh, well, you're clearly an idiot. The dirt is all on the inside of the pot, but you're cleaning the outside." And then Aryadeva retorted that, well, then, washing your body is also stupid, because actually all the negativities, all the non-virtue is in your mind, but you keep washing your body. What's the point? And they had lots of debates like this. And then Aryashura eventually was defeated. He admitted he was defeated. And so he then converted to Buddhism, and he composed some texts, and he was very helpful, very beneficial towards Buddhism.
tobishera sogi wate so kong sunli pe nyimbo yiro da tendere laso ta tendere tene ludu de soje chongde de gi lute no ro akon hili pe chande lo gija gi khulu ludu sengi ji pe yire soje ji temba la shawa mobu shi yire se la shawa mobu sheba ro wa shezon ta ludu de cha chibure ta te gi sunde ta teri zo chaware 아니 제일 두제 예 아니 가론소 구구예나 후마 칼리칼리 자세 런렌데 히에난 디기리 따리 히티 헤와 노신 오트네레 아니 제기 개주야 보시야선 두지체 아니 나도 제니 셰비 게위자와데 센질 펜토바도 아니 타두 소제토 비기치도 호와시기스 아니 라소스
Lasso. And yeah, Aryashura is a very important scholar. He made a very beautiful praise to the Buddha, a text that he wrote. And yeah, Nagarjuna, this great master, is also considered very special. The Buddha even made a prophecy that some hundreds of years after the Buddha passes away, then Nagarjuna will be born. And now this text that Nagarjuna composed is finished. And yeah, we will now dedicate the merit, whatever merit we've gained here from studying and teaching this text. And yeah, if there's time in the future and interest, then Kepula is saying that he'll also be happy to teach the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. So let's hope that that happens and let's dedicate the merit.
So to ji jambar pa wi chidar chimbo to kundu zombo tan te ya da kun ji so da lu ge wan de da ton je ra du mo la so
Lasso.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful and so precious. And I'm really looking forward to Kempola teaching the 37 practices of Bodhisattva and wondering also, Olaf, if you will be translating that as well.
Yeah, I hope to if the timings all sort of line up. Yeah.
So
la
thank you
so
so
te che
much. Thank you so very much, Kempola and Olaf. Really, really deeply appreciate all of this. Deeply appreciate. Thank you so much again.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kempula,
Thank you so much.
for teaching us. Yeah, it's been really beneficial. So much gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Kempola. Thank you, Olafla.
Thank you.
Kempola,
Thank
please
you.
teach us again.